Is $500,000 enough to retire? Or do you really need at least $1 million? Hello, members, super savers, and bond course fans. I hope you're having a good week. So, we often hear things like you need $1 million to retire, or perhaps even you need $2 million to retire. Well, what if you don't have millions? And that's what we'll be talking about in today's video, in another real-life example from a Diamond NestEgg member in California who we'll call Joseph. Here are the 3 topics that we'll be covering in today's video. 1. Is $500,000 enough for Joseph to retire? 2. What are Joseph's options at current rates? And what else might he want to think about? And 3. What are some other considerations if you try to model this out yourself? But before we start with Joseph, I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you for your constructive comments to Felicity in this other recent video of a real-life example linked below, where Felicity's financial planner posed the question, how much safety do we really need in retirement? Here's a snippet of Felicity's thank you mail. I've read through all of the comments that were there as of a few days after the video was posted, and I'll go back and re-watch it and read any new comments. I copied the more helpful ones into a Word doc for future reference. I am grateful for this community of, for the most part, very kind and generous people from whom I can learn, along with all that I've learned from you. Thank you for everything you do for all of us. Well, Felicity, thank you for being a part of our community. And so that all of you know what happened after that video, Felicity's follow-up meeting with her financial planner actually worked out very well. Her planner was able to advise her on the Roth conversion, which was the original reason why Felicity went to the planner. And Felicity ended up with a debt versus equity allocation in her portfolio that she was comfortable with, including no selling of her tips. So, as you watch today's video about Joseph in California, do feel free to leave any constructive and/or encouraging thoughts you might have, because I'm sure Joseph will be keeping an eye out for those, just as Felicity was in the video we did for her. As usual, here's a front of video disclaimer. For a detailed disclaimer, please refer to the end of this video. Let's dive in now, folks. So, here's what Joseph's portfolio looks like based on the email that he sent us. He split his assets up between retirement accounts and other savings and investments. Under retirement accounts, Joseph has a SEP IRA, a simplified employee pension individual retirement account, essentially a type of retirement plan that is often used by small businesses and self-employed individuals with a pre-tax value of $94,000, which gives us a post-tax value of about $75,200 if we assume a 20% tax rate for conversion from the SEP IRA's pre-tax value here. In other words, we deduct 20% for taxes from Joseph's current SEP IRA pre-tax value here to get to this SEP IRA post-tax value here, because Joseph will have to pay taxes on all his withdrawals from this IRA, just as anyone who puts some pre-tax money into their 401k will have to pay taxes when they withdraw from it in retirement. Because the IRS wants its share at some point. You may be able to defer taxes for a while when you save for retirement, but you can't avoid them completely. And please also note that the 20% tax rate is our default assumption, as we don't know Joseph's actual tax rate from what he has told us. Joseph also has a Roth IRA, where the money has already been taxed before he put it in, and which grows tax-free, with a post-tax value of $76,000. In addition to these 2 retirement accounts, Joseph's other savings and investments include Vanguard's Money Market Fund, VMFXX, at $200,000, BlackRock's Treasury Fund, TTTXX, at $101,000, 4-week T-bills on auto roll at $37,000, and an Ally CD maturing in January 2025 at $42,000. These 4 post-tax values assume the principal value is post-tax, and Joseph will not have to pay additional taxes when he withdraws and uses these amounts. Any interest, dividends, and other earnings on principal may still be subject to taxes, however. More on this in later sections. All these positions together bring Joseph's total current portfolio value to about $531,200, a little over $500,000 basically. And Joseph also noted that all of these other savings and investments currently pay 5% or more. This is all the money that Joseph will ever have, unless, in his words, my kids pay me back loans that amount to $64,000, which I happily loaned them during very tough times that they were going through. So, we know that Joseph is also a very caring father. Honestly, I wouldn't ask my kids back for any money that I loaned them during very tough times either. But for all you kids out there who've borrowed money from your parents, maybe give them a call or take them out to dinner sometime if you have no plans on paying back those loans. I'm sure your parents would appreciate it. Because this $64,000 in loans to his kids would actually cover Joseph's annual shortfall for a bit more than 3 years. Here's what we mean. Joseph told us that he receives Social Security income in the amount of $21,000 annually, and that he has expenses of $41,000 annually. Do note that Joseph assumes that his Social Security payment will provide sufficient inflation protection for him, so we're not going to discuss any additional inflation protection options. We're also going to assume that his Social Security amount is after tax, because Joseph went on to say in his email that he has $20,000 per year in expenses that will be paid from his cash accounts. This $20,000 here is Joseph's annual shortfall. The $21,000 in annual Social Security income, less the $41,000 in annual expenses. In other words, this $20,000 annual shortfall is what he needs to pull from his portfolio here every year after tax to cover all his expenses. And that's what I meant when I said that the $64,000 in loans to his kids would actually cover Joseph's annual shortfall of $20,000 for a bit more than 3 years. But let's forget about those loans now, because even without his kids repaying their loans, the good news is that Joseph's portfolio, as it stands now, could cover his current annual income shortfall of $20,000 for 21 years, if he wants to have $100,000 left at the end of the period, as he told us he did. That's this total portfolio value of $531,200 here, minus the $100,000 that Joseph wants to have left at the end of the period, divided by his annual income shortfall of $20,000, which gives him a bit over 21 years. Or, in other words, if Joseph takes $20,000 out of his savings every year to pay his bills, he'll still have slightly more than $100,000 left after 21 years. Now, Joseph didn't tell us why he wanted $100,000 left over, and we didn't want to pry. But it's never a bad idea to plan with a bit of cushion for retirement, be it for any unexpected expenses, some residual outstanding debt, or even just some additional money for the kids or grandkids. If Joseph were to be okay with spending everything down, he could even stretch his portfolio out to cover him for 26 years. That's this total portfolio value of $531,200 here, divided by his annual shortfall of $20,000, which gives him a bit over 26 years. Or, in other words, again, if Joseph takes $20,000 out of his savings every year, he'll still have a small amount of money left after 26 years. So, Joseph didn't tell us his current age, but he did tell us that his RMDs, required minimum distributions, for the SEP IRA start in 3 years, which means he should be about 70 now. So, 21 years would carry him to about age 91. And 26 years would carry him to about 96. Joseph's target is for his money to last him until he's 85 years old. So Joseph, congratulations. $500,000 is enough for you to retire, it seems. Do keep in mind that this is just the starting point for our analysis, though. And as we said before, this calculation assumes that Joseph's Social Security payments will provide all the protection he needs against inflation. There are some additional factors that need to be considered, and we will talk a bit more about these shortly. For now, though, let's focus on Joseph's portfolio. As you may have noticed, a significant chunk of Joseph's portfolio is in very short-term liquid investments, which currently benefit from the still high short-term interest rates, but do not really protect him going forward when interest rates are expected to come down. So we will have to look at what we should do about that, because even if Joseph may already have enough savings to meet his goals, we shouldn't just wait for rates to come down and throw money away, so to speak. Plus, making a bit of extra income from your savings in retirement is never a bad idea. You just never know what the future holds, what inflation might look like, whether you want to contribute to your grandchildren's education, etc., etc. So Joseph, you're right in your thinking that you may need to shift your portfolio a bit more towards longer maturities, which brings us nicely to the next section of this video. As our Diamond Nest Egg regulars hear me say often, everyone's financial journey is different. And while we do have an overview of what Joseph's portfolio looks like, there are a lot more specific details that are beyond the scope of this video that we would need to map out a full financial plan for Joseph. So, with that in mind, and given where rates are at the time of this taping, let me explain to you 3 options I would consider if this was my portfolio and financial situation. It's important for you to know that Joseph's preference is to dollar cost average into treasuries. And this makes complete sense given his age and how close he is to retirement. Because as I also say often on this channel and in our bond courses, treasuries as a general category are considered to be the safest, most liquid fixed income investment in the world. But here's the thing. In the current rate environment, there's no simple, easy way for Joseph to dollar cost average into treasuries. So Joseph, I'm not surprised when you tell me that you're really exhausted mentally from thinking about this. I would be too. So if this was my portfolio and financial situation, I strongly consider what I call option 1 here. What I feel would give me the best balance in my portfolio as well as the greatest peace of mind. I would consider buying a combination of fixed income, annuities, and possibly even equities. So in this scenario, I could buy bonds with my SEP IRA money, which would allow me to meet some or all the $4,000 of RMDs, required minimum distributions, that I will need to start taking in 3 years. And that way, I won't have to worry about selling any investments that may be down at an inopportune time in order to make my RMDs. More on the bonds when we talk about option 2. As for the Roth IRA, Joseph did mention that he wouldn't be needing any of the money here for quite some time. So this Roth IRA would then be the account where I would typically suggest putting higher growth investments like stocks, given that all earnings will be tax-free upon withdrawal. I may also want to consider equity alternatives like the Boomer Candy ETFs and dividend funds we've talked about in our recent member videos. And with these amounts here, I would consider buying an annuity. Now, Joseph has said that he's primarily interested in treasuries right now and perhaps annuities at a later date. But if this would be my portfolio, I'd definitely have a look. Because as a point of reference, at the time of this taping, a $100,000 investment in a single premium immediate annuity with one of the best rated annuity companies on the market that we sometimes work with would generate just under $8,000 in income every year for the rest of Joseph's life. Here's a sample illustration at the moment for a 70-year-old male living in California. Here's the $100,000 initial investment at age 70. In this column is the total annual income that would be paid assuming that this person is alive. In this column is the cumulative income. And in this column is the total annual non-taxable income from this amount here. Meaning that if I was to put in a bit more than $300,000 from these amounts here into this sample annuity I just showed you, this shortfall from my Social Security income would be covered for the rest of my life, and I could still invest the remainder of the funds into other assets or keep them for an emergency cushion. Because if I multiply this $7,889 per year for a $100,000 investment times 3 for my $300,000 investment, this would give me $23,667 income per year, most of it not even taxable for the first 10 years. And I would have peace of mind. So, as we can see in this example, certain types of annuities can get interesting depending on your situation, and especially when you consider the lifetime income stream and peace of mind factors. However, do keep in mind that this sample annuity is for illustrative purposes only. As I mentioned earlier, annuity rates change all the time, and even more so in recent months, given the volatility in the bond market. Because guess what? Some of those annuities are also invested in fixed income to some degree. Plus, annuities are not straightforward and may require a bit of time to understand. And they're not cost-free, as the issuer may charge you certain fees. Your best bet, if you're interested in annuities, is to consult your advisor of trust for a proposal. Or to drop us an email to see if we can do anything to help you, like we've been able to do with some of the folks in our Diamond NestEgg community. More to come on annuities from us soon after we get through the next several fixed income videos. Moving on now to option 2. If this was my portfolio and financial situation, and if I wanted to stick to just fixed income, but was willing to expand beyond U.S. Treasuries, I would consider buying safe conservative bonds that pay a coupon above 5% and mature around my target date or age. As I mentioned before with option 1, I could buy these bonds with the SEP IRA money. A coupon above 5% would allow me to basically meet the $4,000 of RMDs that I will need to start taking in 3 years. Because if I earned 5% per year on $94,000 of bonds, this would give me $4,700 per year in interest income, more than sufficient for my RMDs, and already a good part of my yearly shortfall. With option 2, though, I would go further and use most or all of this cash here for bonds as well, rather than annuities and equities as in option 1. But do note that this coupon above 5% is important because it will likely allow the interest income from the bonds after taxes to cover this annual shortfall for my expenses here. Now, so far so good. But, and here's the crux, I'm sure some of you are wondering, where do we find safe conservative bonds that pay a coupon above 5%? Well, here's the list of secondary market non-callable agency bonds that I found on Fidelity over the weekend when we taped this video that pay a coupon above 5%. And these two specifically meet Joseph's timeline of about 15 years when he will hit his target age of 85. Normally, the yield to maturity or yield to worst for callable bonds would be the key driver for my bond selection process. But as I said earlier, and often, everyone's financial journey is different, and this is one of those situations. If this was my portfolio and financial situation, the goal of all these options would be to get me to a number that will allow me to meet this annual shortfall here, and safe conservative bonds that pay a coupon above 5%, like these two here, do that. And that's why the coupon, my regular interest payments in cash, is the key driver in this case. And the yield to maturity, my overall return on the investment, is only the secondary driver. Because in this scenario, I need a safe, predictable income stream for my retirement years to sleep well at night. Another thing to remember is that interest earned on agency bonds issued by the Tennessee Valley Authority here and Federal Home Loan Banks here are exempt from state and local income taxes, like Treasuries are. In addition, if I was to live beyond the target age of 85, when these bonds mature, I would get the principal repayment to enjoy those later years with. So there is an element of longevity management built in here as well. More on this later also. And if Joseph or any of you are interested in having a closer look, if I click on this Tennessee Valley Authority agency bond, here's the QSIP and other additional information. Now, I personally consider agency bonds to be safe and conservative overall, as do many market participants in the industry. But If we take a look at this overview of the different types of bonds that we cover in Bond Beginners, we can see that agency bonds are nonetheless a notch lower in terms of risk and safety than treasuries, as agency bonds are issued by federal agencies and GSEs, and not all agency bonds are explicitly backed by the US government, like all treasuries are. Plus, if you had to sell the bonds before maturity, the liquidity for agencies may be lower than for treasuries, meaning you might have to wait longer and or accept a worse price than anticipated before you can find a willing buyer for your bonds. So, if you're someone who's very, very risk averse, agency bonds as well as municipal bonds and corporate bonds may not be the right option for you. Remember, in the universe of bonds, it's always higher risk, higher return. In the current environment, you simply can't get a coupon above 5% on longer dated treasuries. So you will need to take on a bit more risk if you want to get a bit of a higher return. Bond beginners, folks, please refer back to Module 8 on agency bonds for a refresher on anything we've just talked about, including the Tennessee Valley Authority, as I do think there are some interesting agency bond opportunities depending on your individual situation. And if you're not in our bond courses and want to learn about bond investing and building a bond portfolio before the Fed starts lowering rates, then check out our popular bond course bundle on our website. Use coupon code FALL2024 to get a 10% discount on all our courses before midnight Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Pacific Time on Sunday, September 15th. And as a reminder, our next live Bond Beginners course session is happening in October. Moving on now to option 3. If this was my portfolio and financial situation, and if I was only interested in U.S. Treasuries, I would consider building a Treasury Ladder that gives me at least $20,000 in principal repayments every year until my target date or age. And as a reminder, this $20,000 is Joseph's annual shortfall. And since Joseph wants to cover the next 15 years until he reaches age 85, I would go about building at least a 15-year Treasury Ladder if I were to go with option 3. Here's what this 15-year Treasury Ladder could look like. These black boxes represent the years or rungs in the ladder. So in the very beginning of year 1, I would purchase $20,000 par value of T-bills that will mature at the end of year 1. $20,000 par value of 2-year T-notes that mature at the end of year 2. $20,000 par value of 3-year T-notes that mature at the end of year 3, and so on until I get to this $20,000 par value of 15-year T-bonds that mature at the end of year 15, when the target age of 85 is reached. The dark yellow bars indicate that these are maturities that can be purchased at auction, and the light yellow bars indicate that these are maturities which must be bought on the secondary market. And whenever a bond matures in any given year, the principal repayment of $20,000 from that bond, which is not subject to taxation, could then be used to fully cover the following year's shortfall. I would also earn ongoing interest from my bond ladder, and while the interest might be subject to taxation and will decrease over time as the bond ladder runs off, and I use the repayments to cover the shortfall in my financial plan, it'll still give me a bit of extra cash at regular intervals that I could either reinvest or use for some unexpected spending. Bond masters, folks, if you need a refresher on anything we've just talked about, please refer back to Module 3, and specifically to this video here on laddering when rates are uncertain, and these other videos here on other bond strategies. And again, if you're not in our bond courses, don't forget to use coupon code FALL2024 to get a 10% discount on all our courses before midnight Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Pacific Time on Sunday, September 15th. So back to option 3. This 15-year ladder would require an initial investment of about $300,000, which could be purchased with a combination of funds from the SEP IRA, where RMDs will need to be taken soon anyway, as well as from any of these other sources here. This means that funds from the Roth IRA could still be used for some higher growth investments like equities, if I were so inclined. And it also means that there's no need to necessarily touch this money in the Ally CD before it matures and incur an early withdrawal penalty. And as I said before, the interest earned from this bond ladder could be used as a buffer for unexpected expenses or reinvested if not used. So to summarize, if this were my portfolio and financial situation, option 1 with a combination of fixed income, annuities, and even equities would probably be my preferred option because I could use some of the funds in my portfolio to purchase enough of an annuity to cover my expected shortfall for the rest of my life. Plus, I could still invest the rest of my funds here as I see fit without having to worry about not having enough to get by. Option 2 is what I would choose if I wanted to stick with just fixed income and I had a sufficient risk tolerance for agencies and possibly even some investment grade corporates. In this case, I would be living off the coupon payments on top of Social Security until my target date or age. And when I reach my target date or age, I would receive the principal repayment from my bonds, which I would then need to think about what to do with and how to reinvest. In Marcus's words, that's a luxury problem. It's nice to have it in principle, but it's still nonetheless something to keep in mind. Option 3 is what I would choose if I wanted to stick to US Treasuries only and didn't mind that I was gradually using up most of my principal to cover my ongoing shortfall for living expenses. In addition, I would have to invest the time and effort needed to build out and manage a ladder that may resemble something like this one here. Keep in mind that the more rungs you have in your ladder and or the more purchases you make, the more complex your ladder will be and the more time and effort you will need to take care of it. Right. So now that we've covered all 3 of these options and what I would consider if this was me, drop a comment below. If you were Joseph and this was your portfolio and financial situation, which option would you choose and why? And once you've left your comment, let's head on over to the last section of today's video. When we looked at Joseph's portfolio and went through this analysis and some scenarios about what I would consider if this was me, I had said that there's some additional key factors that need to be considered, especially for those of you who may try to replicate something similar with your own numbers. The first very important factor is inflation. We didn't talk much about this for Joseph because he feels that the cost of living adjustments, the COLA, on his Social Security income here will provide him with sufficient inflation protection. However, if you fall into the camp that worries about Social Security COLA not being sufficient inflation protection, you may want to consider adding some additional inflation protection, such as I-bonds or TIPS, to a portfolio that looks like Joseph's. The second factor is expenses. We've assumed that Joseph's expenses stay the same over time for the sake of simplicity. In real life, this isn't always the case, even if you assume that inflation will remain under control. Some of us will have more expenses in retirement, for example, from travel and healthcare costs, and others will have less, for example, via downsizing and or relocating to a lower tax state. So be sure to build in whatever assumptions make sense for you. And of course, don't forget about taxes. Taxes are also an expense. And the third factor is longevity. Joseph was pretty steadfast about making a plan only until his target age of 85. And we didn't ask why, but I'm sure he has his reasons. And I hear this regularly from some of you here. I'm not going to live long enough to wait for this 5-year or 20-year bond to mature. The fact of the matter is, maybe you won't, but maybe you will. So be careful of planning too precisely to a certain target age. And where possible, build in a buffer if you don't have a lifetime income stream from Social Security, a company pension, or an annuity. All right, members, super savers, and Bond Course fans, that's it for today after a video that was longer than we had expected. Happy modeling and analyzing for those of you who want to take a look at your own numbers now. I hope you enjoyed our case study of Joseph's situation, and if you want to decide for yourself to be able to invest in bonds and build your bond portfolio like Joseph is doing, then check out this video here on our 2024 bond courses. Remember to use coupon code FALL2024 to get a 10% discount on all our courses before midnight Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Pacific Time on Sunday, September 15th. I've also linked all the details on our bond courses and YouTube Super Saver membership below this video for your convenience. See you again very soon with more brand new wealth building content for your financial journey.